A couple of weeks ago, I was scrolling on Reddit when I found this post. Now, the post is fairly generic, as it asks for a Childish Gambino song that sounds one emotion, but the lyrics are actually another emotion. Now, you see these types of posts all the time, where they just want comments and interactions to bump themselves up in a subreddit. However, naturally, I started looking at it, and I began filling out each box in my head. And for some of the boxes, I did struggle, and was unable to find a song that fit that box perfectly. But there was one box where I had no issue, and that was this one right here, where it sounds hopeful, but the lyrics are actually sad. For me personally, there is no better Childish Gambino song than 3005 for this box. It's one of Gambino's most popular songs, probably down to the upbeat and catchy tone of the entire song. However, when you actually analyze the song and the wider context of it, you realize that it is truly quite heartbreaking. While on the surface 3005 appears to be an upbeat love song to a significant other, it is actually a heartbreaking existential suffering of a very immature man. However, to fully understand 3005, we must first look at the wider context of the song. 3005 was released as a single for Donald Glover's 2013 album Because of the Internet. Throughout the album, we are introduced to this narrative and story of a character simply known as The Boy. The Boy is actually a man. He is in his 20s and he is quite rich, but he spends his life as an internet troll. However, when listening to Because of the Internet, you realize that he's in the middle of an existential suffering. He's realizing that so far he's lived a meaningless life and doesn't really have anything to show for what he's lived. He then begins to struggle and believe that every aspect of life is just pointless. He begins focusing on topics that are completely out of his control, such as death and time. The Boy is a very, very immature person, as you can tell by his name only being The Boy. Not only does this title show how immature he is, it also shows how meaningless his life has been up to this point. He hasn't earned the label of a name, and he is very unmemorable. No one who he has met has remembered his name or cares about it. He is just a background character of life. No one pays any attention to him because there's no need to. Because of him being an internet troll, he wouldn't leave a good impression on anyone that he would meet. However, throughout the entirety of Because of the Internet, he becomes aware that his life is dull and monotonous. However, instead of having the mature response of trying to better his life, he begins to really struggle with this feeling. A key example of this can be seen on the music video for the song Sweatpants. The Boy is shown walking continuously around a diner as the people around him start to look like him. Obviously, the fact that he is continuously going around the same place shows how he has lived a monotonous life. He does the same thing day in, day out and doesn't get anything out of it. However, the fact that people around him start to look exactly like him creates sort of a claustrophobic feeling for me personally. While the diner is a very public and open area, the Boy becomes surrounded by people who are exactly like him. This music video perfectly shows to me the existential suffering that the Boy is currently having. He's realizing that his life is wasted and he's beginning panicking and almost having a panic attack. I also want to quickly focus on the public setting of a diner. The Boy has lived a lot of his life online, so it's natural that he'd start to panic in a public area. He doesn't go out often, and when he does, he begins to panic and want to go back online. He spent so much time online that he's become disconnected from wider society. He is a social outcast and does not fit in. And this is the unfortunate reality for a lot of young people, particularly young men nowadays. A lot of young men spend so much time online that they begin to struggle to fit into wider society. I want to make a bit of a comparison now to a show that you may have seen, especially if you're from the UK, called Adolescence. In that show, the lead character is a teenage boy called Jamie. He too spends a lot of time online and actually ends up murdering a classmate. Now, the reason I have decided to make the comparison to Because of the Internet and Adolescence is because, in a way, Jamie is a more extreme version of The Boy. While The Boy is sort of realizing that he does need to change, Jamie didn't and ended up on that path. It's a path that the Boy from Because of the Internet could have very well gone down. Both young men spent so much time online that they became disconnected and a social outcast. Now, Adolescence has received a lot of praise for its social commentary on the real life situations of many young men. Now, I personally believe that Because the Internet should receive some of that similar praise. Because the Internet was released nearly 12 years ago, and that was a very different era of the internet. Online addictions weren't really a thing as the internet was still developing. Because the internet is perhaps a more positive version of Adolescence. Because the internet does still tell a very sad story, but it is a more positive one than that. While the Boy doesn't go down the path of murder, he does still struggle a lot. And we see a lot of these struggles on 3005. I first want to talk about the music video to 3005, as I believe there's a lot to unpack there. We see the boy going around a Ferris wheel for the entire duration of the music video. For me, this connotes the feeling that I previously mentioned, that the boy feels that his life is monotonous and meaningless. While he is moving, he's not actually going anywhere. He's just constantly going around in circles and making no progress with his life. Think about in real life if you were to go on a Ferris wheel. At the end of it, while you may have seen some good views, you haven't really achieved anything. This could be how the boy feels. He feels that despite maybe seeing some cool things and doing some cool things, he's not achieved much. Next to the boy is a bear. For me, this connotes the immaturity of the boy that I previously mentioned. Despite being a grown man, he's had to take his toy out into a public place. This perhaps shows that he's emotionally stunted due to him spending so much time online. However, as the music video goes on, the bear begins to fall apart and almost decay. Now, in the real world, this is usually a bad thing, as your toy is falling apart and not being able to use properly. However, in this context, I believe it's actually a positive thing. If the bear does represent the boy's immaturity, it shows that he's losing that. In other words, he's becoming more mature as the song goes on. And the fact that something that is usually a bad thing is a good thing for the boy shows how different he is to everyone else. Whilst one thing is bad for everyone else, to him it is a good thing. He's not like other people. He's very, very different, and not in a good way. He's so disconnected from wider society, he doesn't even seem like a person. However, if you look at the bear in the context of the setting of the music video, you get a very different meaning and perspective. The music video appears to be shot in a carnival or a fair, and a bear is usually a prize there. Other people would usually win that for you and then give it to you. However, the boy has probably had to win it for himself and give it to himself. This shows his loneliness in the world. He has to go out and do things by himself, as no one wants to do these things with him. He's perhaps pushed so many people away due to his immaturity. This feeling of loneliness is probably having a knock-on effect and causing him to have more existential problems. While the majority of the music video focuses on the boy and the bear, we occasionally get to see the wider world. The first time appears to be quite normal, however the second time everything is on fire. For me, this connotes how the boy's life has deteriorated as he's gotten older. At first, being immature and being online is seen as normal by the rest of the world. But as time goes on and you get older, the same activities that were once normal show that you're a mess and immature. What I also find interesting is the boy remains okay and unharmed whilst the rest of the world is on fire. This could potentially connote how he has been oblivious to his mistakes. He's been sheltered and distracted by the internet. He's been sheltered and distracted by the internet while his life falls apart around him. The final shot of the music video shows the bear, alone and completely destroyed. The boy is no longer present. He's stepped away from his immaturity. He's realized how immature he is and decided to step away and grow. However, instead of potentially working on the issues, he instead panics and begins having an existential crisis. He begins to focus on topics that are completely out of his control, such as time and death. Now I'd like to look at the lyrics to the song. The song starts with the chorus where Childish Gambino says, "No matter what you say or what you do, when I'm alone, I'd rather be with you." Now, I think these are the lyrics that make people believe that this is a love song. And this could be true. These lyrics could just be a heartfelt message to a significant other. It's important to note that Gambino doesn't ever mention who or what he's talking to. He simply says the word you. This could mean anyone, a girl, himself, God, anything. I think this connotes how the boy doesn't know what is important to him. As he tries to take a step away from the internet, he doesn't know what to dedicate his attention to. This may have caused his existential suffering. As he becomes unsure what to focus on, he may have reached the conclusion that nothing is important. This therefore makes his entire life seem meaningless. We then move on to the first verse where Donald says, "Crew at my house and we party every weekend." Now this line actually links to the other pieces of media that Childish Gambino released for Because of the Internet. Specifically, it refers to the screenplay and the short film titled Clapping for the Wrong Reasons. In both pieces of media, we see the boy holding parties with his friends. However, he doesn't gain any enjoyment or fulfillment from them. This once again shows how he has wasted his life with immature behavior. Even as he's gotten older, he's continued to act like a teenager. He's chased short-term fulfillment instead of long-term success. And now it's finally catching up with him. As the rest of his friends grow and live mature lives, he's still acting like a child. He's dedicated so much of his life to partying, and now he realizes how pointless this has all been. However, because of his immature mindset, instead of replacing this bad habit with a good one, he instead takes on the mentality that a lot of his life is pointless. He believes that because he's going to die one day, what's the point of living a life? We then get the lines, "On the radio, that's my favorite song, makes me bounce around like I don't know, like I won't be here long. This line once again ties into the theme of the existential suffering that the boy is having. His thoughts are played with the idea of dying after a meaningless life. Now, as I previously mentioned, a mature reaction would be to replace bad habits like partying with good habits. This would in turn create a purpose within the boy's life. However, potentially due to the boy's immaturity, he instead decides to distract himself in a hope to get rid of these thoughts. First it was with partying, now it's with music. I think this line is also a very important social commentary. Many people do use music as an escape from their issues. Now, while this can help in moderation, it can be harmful if someone completely ignores their problems due to music. We then get the lines, Mi casa, su casa, got it stripping like Gaza. Now, the first part is in Spanish, translating to my house is your house. This essentially means that what's mine is yours. I think this links back to the partying that the boy previously mentioned. The boy would invite people into his house for parties to get that quick fix of fulfillment. The second part of the line gives another meaning. Stripping could refer to the boy inviting women back to his house, but he then mentions the Gaza Strip, which has obviously been in the news a lot over the past couple of years. Now, I'm not claiming to be an expert on this situation as it's very complicated and doesn't directly impact me. However, I believe that there are a lot of issues and conflict between Israel and Palestine over both of them wrongfully owning each other's land. Now, this, in a way, is a similar situation to the boy, only on a much larger scale. The boy also has people in his area who shouldn't be there. The people he invites to his parties are harmful for him, yet he continues to host these parties. As the verse carries on, we hear the lines, got a house full of homies, why I feel so the opposite. Now, this is actually the main premise of the short film, Clapping for the Wrong Reasons. In it, the boy has a large house filled with his friends. However, despite being filled with his homies, it doesn't feel homey. This again shows his unfulfillment with the life that he's created for himself. At the end of the first verse, we then get the lines, sorry, I'm just scared of the future, till 3005, I got your back, we can do this. This line is obviously similar to the chorus, however, this time the boy attaches himself to whoever he's talking about. He calls them we, he makes them an item. In his head, he is already a part of the life of whoever he's talking about. This again shows his immaturity, as in just one verse, he's gone from not knowing who or what to pursue to attaching himself to them. I believe the apology at the start of these lines is actually to himself. The first verse is essentially the boy talking about his emotional loneliness. He begins to panic and ponder what the purpose of his life is. However, this apology is a brief moment of maturity as he understands he needs to give himself a break. He understands that what might be best for him is to take a step back from the world and particularly the internet. He needs to think about what he wants to pursue. We then move on to the second verse where we hear the lines, nobody out here's got it figured out, so therefore I've lost all hope of a happy ending. Despite previously acknowledging that he should take a step back and give himself a break, the boy has regressed back to panicking about the world's issues. This time the boy is worrying that he'll never find love. And if you take a look at the boy's life so far, it's a fair worry for him to have. He doesn't live an attractive life, locking himself away from society and staying online. Also, due to his immaturity, perhaps the boy determines his self-worth from the validation he gets from others. That's potentially why he holds these parties. When people are having fun, it makes him seem likable. He can only love himself if others love him, when it should be the other way around. Gambino then says the lines, cause we're all just ticking time bombs. Now this shows us another worry that the boy has, which is death. To him, everyone is destined to die, so everyone's lives are meaningless. What's the point in doing all these things and having all these hobbies if you're just going to have the same outcome as everyone else? Or perhaps he's saying that he himself is a ticking time bomb because he can't control his emotions. Like I mentioned earlier, the boy could be emotionally stunted because he spent so much time online and away from the world. Therefore, he may not be able to control those emotions and he may get angry easily and drive people away. Those people at the parties probably don't feel like his friends as he drives them away before he can make a connection with them. This could also be why he feels so lonely in the world. The final lines of the second verse say, and if I lose my mental, just hold my hand, even if you don't understand, hold up. Just like at the end of the first verse, we get a brief moment of maturity from the boy. I think the positioning of the mature moments are intentional from Donald Glover. They're both placed late on in the verses and right at the end. I think this is because the boy is only maturing late on in his life. He's probably the last of his peers to mature. These lines are a message to whoever or whatever the boy is talking to. He wants someone to stand by him as he tries to figure out his issues. And while this is a good step for the boy, these lines again show how he needs validation and support from others. While he is willing to take a step forward and mature, he still clearly has a lot of growth to do. 3005 may sound upbeat and beautiful, however the real story shows a scared, immature man. The boy is finally realizing how he's wasted his life up to now, and instead of maturely changing his life for the better, he's instead immaturely spending his time worrying about things that are completely out of his control. While 3005 does show glimpses of maturity, it's ultimately a heartbreaking reality check, and this can be applied to the entirety of Because the Internet. If you haven't listened to Because the Internet, do go and give it a listen. The story and narrative is incredible, and do immerse yourself with the other pieces of media that were released for the album. Many people haven't checked out the screenplay and short videos, and these add another layer of depth to this already incredible album. In my opinion, Because the Internet is not only one of the best albums released in recent years, but one of the best pieces of multimedia. The interconnection between everything released for Because the Internet is incredible and so smart.